All right, week 6, here we go. And if you look at the title of today's message, you're going, well, didn't we do this already? Yes, sort of. Week 4. Week 4 was start an emergency fund, a starter emergency fund. This is building a full emergency fund. We're moving on, and notice the progression here in the different weeks. This isn't just randomly choosing different topics throughout the week. We started at where we started, that God owns everything, and we're moving our way through, because if you don't have the one before it settled, or you're working on it, or whatever, the next one's not real. You're not gonna be able to do it very well, right? Like, you're not going to be able to pay off your debt very well if you haven't got your budget in order, right? And you're not going to get your budget in order if your heart's not right. If you don't understand that it's God's, right? All of this is building. So after you have started working on your budget, and you've established, or you're working on establishing a starter emergency fund, so that things like birthdays, you can just say no. You don't have to buy a gift. We talked about that last time. We talked about that last session, because we were like, well, we were doing this early on. We had to say I'm sorry. Like, we can't go with you out to eat. We can't do that. We can't go here. We don't have money for gifts this year. Like, it's not in the budget. That's okay. You're not letting anybody else down. You might be letting somebody else down, but that's on them. You don't need to worry about that. None of those things are required by God. Oh, you better show up with a birthday present, or you don't really love them. That's not in, I don't know where that is in the Bible. But what I do know is that you are supposed to be a good steward of the money that you have been given. So with these things are building on each other. You got to have a budget going. You got the starter emergency fund, so that you can get that budget in place with that. And when you have something that comes, you got to get a new alternator. Okay, well, that's coming out of the emergency fund, and you can keep going, or whatever. Then you can start working on paying off debt, getting yourself some of that margin that we talked about, some breathing room, get some of that burden off of you, so that you can build, which leads to here, building a fuller emergency fund. That starter emergency fund, you're thinking, man, I get $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever a number that was for you, seems like a big task. And we're on our way there, we're working on it, but that's a big task. So talking about this, which is a full emergency fund, which is more like 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses, that seems even more daunting. It does if you start there. But we're not saying right now you need to be building this. You need to be getting those other things in order first. And for some people that have shared, like we're not in any debt, we've got our budget going, you might be at this point where you don't have any debt, you're budgeting your money, but you don't really have anything set aside, like if you were to lose your job for 3 to 6 months. That's where this next session is leading us to. We're talking about not just getting out of financial problems, but settling and getting some financial stability. We want to prepare not just for those smaller emergencies, but maybe some of the bigger disruptions that happen in our lives. Starter fund helps with some of the smaller crises, but a fuller emergency fund helps with larger stuff like job loss, medical issues, major repairs, difficult seasons in life, and we all know those different kinds of things. Proverbs chapter 21. I love the Proverbs.
They call me foolish a lot.
Yes, they call me foolish a lot. But there's a lot of, that's what this is, wisdom here. What can be kind of hard once you get past chapter 10, or chapter 9 and 10, it can be hard to read through the Proverbs straight through because you're going through it and you're like, okay, that's a great proverb. And then the next verse is about something totally different. And then the next verse is about something totally different from that. And then the next verse is totally different from all three of the ones above. And so you can get a little confused there. Maybe not confused, but just kind of, it's hard to read all at one time. But there is a lot of good wisdom. Little nuggets I love that God put little nuggets of wisdom so we don't have to try to remember large, like we've got to get this 15-step thing, in order to handle this particular kind of issue in our life. It's like, nope, one verse. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 20. Yeah, let me just read the couple before it, just so you hear what I'm saying, okay? Verse 18. The wicked is a ransom for the righteous, and the traitor for the upright. It is better to live in a desert land than with a quarrelsome and fretful woman. I just wanted to read that one out loud, just for fun. But no, it says fretful woman. You can't change it to man. That would be changing God's word. Number 20, verse 20. Yeah, let's not change God's word. Verse 20, which is the verse we're looking at. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. So the wise man, we want to be wise, right? That's what we've been talking about this whole time. We want to be wise in how we handle our finances, we steward the things that God has given us. The wise man, according to this verse, does not consume everything they earn. Everything they get. And that's what we talked about a few weeks ago. That's how a lot of people live. They just look at their bank account and go, do I have any more left? I do? Okay, let's go use it. Huh? Let's go eat out, yeah. Until you end up going too far and you have to overdraft. But anyway, so a wise man does not consume everything they earn. They keep a reserve. That's what that is talking about there. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling. They keep something there. They retain some of that earnings, those provisions that God has provided for them. But a foolish man spends everything that he gets. I again love the clarity of these short little verses. You can try to argue with that all you want. Well, you're not in my situation. You're not there. That was 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago when that was written, or whatever. And you're like, it still holds true. Again, what kind of other issues in your life will be manifested if you are constantly eating and spending and using everything that you have? Your life is going to be the foolish life is going to be one of heartache and difficulty. It's as clear here. It's a very clear biblical principle on saving. If you want to be wise, don't consume everything you get. Keep a reserve. Retain provisions. So we've used this passage before, but I want to go back to it because I want to read some of it. Genesis chapter 41. So there's going to be a lot of overlap because this is talking about saving again, but in terms of an emergency fund. But again, we're building off of where we've been and where we're going. 42. Sorry. No, what did I say? Genesis 41. Yep, that's correct. So you remember that this is the story of Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. You remember the dream? What was the dream? If you know it. Skinny cows eating some fat cows, right? Fat corn, skinny corn. And so it goes through, how he ended up interpreting that dream for the Pharaoh. Remember the cupbearer and all that kind of stuff. Well, eventually he gets in front of him and he shares with him what this dream means. So he explains all that to him. Let's go to verse 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh that he is about what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are the 7 years, 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them there will rise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land, and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. So he interprets the dream, and then he even tells Pharaoh, hey, you need to prepare for this. You need to set somebody over this. He didn't offer his own services here. But this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne shall I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it in Joseph's hand, and clothed him in the garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. And he married people and did these things, and we'll skip down here a little bit. And during the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly, and he gathered up all the food, these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt, and he put the food in the cities. He did what he said. Verse 50, before the year of famine came, he had more sons. All right. 53, the 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. There was famine in all lands. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. And what he says to you, do. So Jacob did exactly what the Lord, or prepared, just like the Lord had shown them in the dream. Obviously, there's more involved. You know, remember, he from where he was down in the pit, all the way up to the second in command. We're not going to take this and run with it and say, you know, if you believe hard enough and have enough faith, God will put you over everything. Don't get that twisted. But the point is, he set him in that position because he knew he was going to be a wise man. He was going to actually take what God had said and do something about it. What could have happened here is he could have given the interpretation of this dream, and Pharaoh could have said, let's party for 7 years. Let's live it up then, because we're all going to die after that anyway. I mean, who can live through 7 years of famine? but they prepared. They prepared. The wise prepare. So this saving, like we talked about, was it a couple weeks ago? Remember, saving is not a failure to have faith. Saving is an act of faith because it is biblical. It's what God has shown His people is the wise way to live, is the wise way to handle the things that God gives to them. Now, I keep saying money, or I keep saying that, finances. Obviously here this is food. And for some people who are farmers or things like that, it might still be that. But you get what I'm saying, okay? So this is a faithful thing that we do to save. When we do it in faith, from faith, for faith in God. So why then are we talking about building a fuller or bigger, a larger emergency fund? Why does that matter? Because as much as we recognize and know that those smaller emergencies happen all the time, and I think we all agreed with that over the last couple weeks ago, I think we can also all agree that the bigger things happen too. You lose a job. There's layoffs at the company where you work, and you happen to be on the list, right? What do you do in that situation? Yes, you work hard to find another job, what have you, but what if it takes you 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months to find something? Well, first of all, you just get to work doing whatever you can, but in order to get back to a salary or something that can actually, support your family, you need to have something in place, or you should be working towards that. You have different medical issues that come up. There's a reason why disability insurance exists. Disabilities happen. Keep you from being able to fulfill your work responsibilities, whatever that might be. Eventually, vehicles do wear out. As much as we talked about paying cash for vehicles, that vehicle is not going to last forever. You're gonna have to buy another one. It will likely, the transmission will go out at some point. So if you're a family that does not have any reserves, that does not have that, is exposed, is vulnerable. So a larger emergency fund is, once again, not a replacement for trust in God. Well, if I have more of this, then I don't have to trust God as much. That's not it. Because you trust God, because you take Him at His word, you're building this out of faith, knowing there are things that happen in this world because of sin, because we live in a sin-cursed world. This is a wise stewardship. We trust God. We don't trust the account that we're building. We trust in God, and we do that out of faith in Him. We want to walk wisely. We want to be wise stewards. We don't want to be fools. Now, there's got to be a balance here. So this is where, once again, we have to look at the heart. One of the major issues in who's out there? One of the major issues in America, and you can know this by looking around and seeing how many self-storage places exist, or by watching TV and they make entire shows based on people who hoard. They're hoarders, right? Oh yeah, they do the storage wars kind of stuff. Yeah. Like, hey, you got so much stuff you can't even pay for it anymore. Somebody else is going to buy all your junk and put it in another storage somewhere else until they sell it to other people who fill up their storage buildings. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. So the Bible, again, it tells us to have wisdom. It tells us to prepare. But at the same time, the Bible also tells us, it condemns one of the 7 deadly sins is greed. Right? And One of the stories we shared a couple of weeks ago from Luke is the rich man who, he's like, oh, look at all the stuff I've got. My barns are full, but I've got more stuff to put in them. Well, I'm going to tear those down and build bigger barns. And then God takes his life, right, in that same night. It's like, what good was that, right? He was trusting in his riches. It was greed. There was hoarding there. So what's the difference? Saving in a faithful way, like we're talking about, saving says, I want to steward what God has given me well. I want to be able to care for my family, and I want to prepare wisely. Hoarding, on the other hand, said, my safety is wrapped up in the things that I have. If I don't have this, if I don't have that, if I don't have this much of something, then I don't feel safe. That's fear. That's trusting in your riches. That's trusting in what you have saved more than God. Again, the putting the things aside may look similar, but what is the heart behind it? If the heart is not for God, if the heart is not for saving from faith, and it is hoarding out of fear, then those are two completely different scenarios. Jesus warns us that against laying up treasures for ourselves where moth and rust destroy, for selfish security, for earthly reasons. And once again, Scripture says the wise person is prudent. They prepare. They think ahead. They know, living in this sin-fallen world, that things are going to happen and you need to be prepared for them in advance. So the difference between those two kinds of living, saving and hoarding, is whether or not you are trusting in God and living for His glory or for your own. Turn over to 1 Timothy chapter 5. It's true. It's true. Well, and it's not just, so hoarding is not just about, we're not just referring to the stuff in the storage rooms. We're not just talking about the stuff filling up your houses. You might be hoarding your savings account. You're trusting in how much money you have in a particular thing, and we'll talk about here in just a minute why that's a problem. It doesn't always look like dirty trash in your house, piled up to here. That's the extreme of that attitude. That's taking that attitude to its logical conclusion. But their hoarding in the heart is still a faith issue. It's a lack of trust in God. Saving is different. It's wise. It's seeking what God wants you to be doing. So, 1 Timothy 5. I'm going to read verses 3 through 8 for our context. But verse 8 is the main verse. Honor widows who are truly widows. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God and continues in her hope, and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. But she who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives. Command these things as well, so that they may be without reproach. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So this saving, this biblical doctrine of saving is a way for us to show love for our family that God has also stewarded us with. If we are not preparing, then we're putting them at risk. Providing for your family includes preparing where you can, preparing where as much as possible. Now, I'm not saying you have to be rich in order to properly prepare or properly provide for your family. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying if you don't have a full emergency fund, then you don't love your family. That's not the point.
I mean, it took us like 7 years to get
Yeah, it took us a long time. Again, the point is the heart, the condition of the heart, and what you're aimed towards. And if the goal is a godly one or not. We want to provide for our family. We want to prepare as much as possible. Again, this is wisdom, biblical wisdom. It's not showing a lack of faith. It's obedience to what God has said. So let's talk more practically here. A fuller emergency fund should be based on actual monthly expenses, not guessing. Not going, I think a good amount would be $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever it is. I mean, those are good numbers, but be realistic. An emergency fund should be based on actual expenses. And furthermore, your emergency fund should be based on a particular part of your expenses, not all of them. Because like we've been talking about, some of your expenses, some of the budgeted items that you will have include things like saving for a trip or saving for this or a monthly entertainment fund, right? Some of those things, if you're in a literal emergency, you don't have those anymore, right? We're talking like bare minimum, what does it cost for us to live in our house and in our household? So you need to know what your fixed expenses are. This is why getting out of debt is so important, because that's a fixed expense. You need to know what your fixed expenses are. You need to know some of those places where you're vulnerable in your finances. And you need to know what amount would actually help your family survive a difficult stretch of time like 3 to 6 months. So that's why budgeting, that's why saving goes together. We need to know what those numbers actually are. Now let me give you some encouragement here. Sarah just gave it away. No, it's good. It's good. Saving takes time. Well, I'm not even talking about that kind of saving yet. We're just talking about getting money in an account that you can use when needed immediately. We're not talking about retirement funds, or we're not talking about long-term savings yet. That's coming in a later one. But getting to this point where you have this emergency fund, full emergency fund set aside, and preparing yourself for exactly what we're talking about will take you some time. You got to get the budget right. You got to get your debt going. You got to get some of these things in place before you can really even get to that point, and that's okay. It's not okay to go, well, I'm not there yet, so I'm not doing anything. Well, that's dumb. As those of you who love David Miller, as he would always say, as Granny Miller would say, don't be dumb all your life. He knew how to say things in a memorable way. So know what would actually help your family survive that length of time. It's going to take time. That's okay. Slow and steady wins the race. You've heard that. But we're talking about not just slow and steady just for the sake of, winning the race. It's for the sake of faithfulness. Even slow faithfulness is still faithfulness. He's not looking at you and saying, you're not as far along as Mark is. You're not as faithful. No. It's in with what you've been given. Are you going to be faithful in what God has given you? That's what matters. So take your time, or it might take time, but stay consistent. It's about the direction you're heading and the motivation behind it. So remember, the wise man keeps a reserve, and the foolish man consumes everything. So the question to ask before you even begin to build is, am I living in a way that just assumes life is always going to be easy because I just always consume? Or am I stewarding with wisdom? Preparation, as we've been talking about, is not panic. It is the wise way to live. Now, there are some preppers that would fall more into the hoarding category. I'm not going to call anybody out. But preparing is good. It's biblical. All right, so homework for this, following this.
So I'm looking at that chart there on the back. So you might set a monthly budget and you can afford $500 a month on groceries. You spend $500 a month on groceries. But that may not be what the minimum would be for an emergency.
Exactly.
I can live on $300 a month.
Right.
Rice and beans.
Exactly. That's why I don't have like a specific thing here, but that's what I was saying a minute ago. There are some things that would just be cut. What's emergency?
What this is supposed to be is, like Steve said, what do you need, what food-wise, if it's an emergency? Is that part of this?
Sure. Yeah. And again, it's going to be different for everybody, and there's not like an exact number. Like there's not like in an emergency situation, you have to cut your grocery bill by 63%. No.
Like transportation, you have to get your job.
Right.
You come to church.
If
you don't need to take a weekend,
right.
5-hour drive.
Yeah. If the job is not the thing that puts you in the situation that you don't have money, you might not be driving because you don't have a job. But again, that's why it's a range. If you don't get the percentages right, or if you don't get the exact amounts of things right, that's not as important as getting a number that will actually be realistic for essential household expenses. And then you multiply that number by 3 or 6 or 1 or whatever the emergency fund range is, and then you aim for that. There's been times when ours has been smaller, and there's been times when it's been bigger. It's just it's different depending on our season of life. This is just another. It's like the emergency fund, in that this is not your full savings. Because guess what? Retirement is not 3 to 6 months. You need more than that, right? But this is to get you through the 40, 50 years of career where something might happen that throws you off by 3 to 6 months. Or you have, or for the 18 years or 20 years or 25 years while you have kids in the home or whatever. So calculate that 1 month of expenses and then multiply it by 3 to 6. Then you have a range to work with, and then decide how much you can save each month. Again, after consumer debt is being addressed. Now, for some of you, you might go ahead and take a small number. You're using $100 a month to start your debt snowball. Okay. Well, maybe you can get another $20, $25, $30 a month. Go ahead and put that one over to start saving over here. And then once the debt snowball's taken off and paid everything off over there, you start applying that money to this until it's full. But the point is to get started. And once again, take the time to pray, to determine, to examine your heart in doing these things, to make sure you're not doing it out of fear, but out of faith.
We want to put this money in get to.
Yes. So just like your starter emergency fund, this is going to be something that's going to be smaller, that you can use more liquid is the term. right? That you can get into faster. You don't have to, and that you won't lose money to take it back out of. If you put this into, a retirement fund, and then you're like, okay, well, I've got my 3 to 6 months. It's in there in my retirement fund. Well, if you ever need that, you've got to take a 10 or 15% fee to get it out of there, and then you have to also pay taxes on that amount. That's not a good idea, because that's not what this money's for. This money is not for long-term, retirement or other, savings. This is for emergencies. And so you could keep it in maybe like a CD or a money market or something like that, but, because with a CD, for example, you would just lose the rest of the interest you might have gotten, but you can still take out what you've put in there. And that's okay. But anyway, but again, depending on where you are, you might not even be ready for this step yet. And like I said, that's okay. I'm not mad at you. Just be working towards being faithful in your finances, in your home. Okay, well, we got 2 minutes left, so good job, well done. We didn't get any of the discussion questions, but you had some good questions along the way, and so that's good enough.